The hospital waiting room was unusually quiet, filled only with the distant beeping of medical machines and the soft footsteps of nurses moving through the polished hallways. Daniel sat alone near the window, absent-mindedly stirring a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. He had come to visit an old family friend recovering from surgery, but visiting hours had been delayed. With nothing else to do, he watched strangers pass by, each carrying their own worries and burdens. As he looked down at his phone, he noticed someone standing in front of him. A young woman, no older than 28, held a baby wrapped in a pale blue blanket. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying for hours, and she seemed nervous enough to turn around and leave at any second. "Excuse me," she said softly. Daniel looked up. "Yes." She hesitated, gripping the blanket tighter. "I know this is going to sound completely crazy." He gave a polite smile. "I've heard some strange things before." She took a deep breath, then said the words that made him think he had misunderstood her. "Can you be the father of my baby for just one day?" Daniel stared at her in complete silence. "I'm sorry, what?" She lowered her head, embarrassed. "I know how impossible it sounds. Most people would walk away before I even finished the sentence." He blinked several times, trying to process what he had just heard. "Why would you ask a complete stranger something like that?" She looked around the waiting room before quietly sitting in the chair across from him. "Because I don't have anyone else." Daniel folded his arms. "I can't agree to anything unless you tell me exactly what's going on." She nodded slowly. "I expected you to say that." For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, she whispered, "My name is Emily. I'm Daniel." She managed a faint smile before looking down at the sleeping baby. "His name is Noah." The baby slept peacefully, completely unaware of the difficult conversation happening around him. Emily gently adjusted the tiny blanket. "My grandfather is dying." Daniel's expression softened. "The doctors say he probably has only a day or two left." "I'm sorry." She nodded. "He raised me after my parents died in a car accident. Everything I have, everything I became, is because of him." Her voice trembled. "He's the only family I've ever really had." Daniel remained silent, letting her continue. "He always dreamed of seeing me married." She forced a sad laugh. "And he wanted to meet his great-grandchild." She paused. "He knows about Noah. But he thinks Noah has a loving father." Daniel slowly understood where the story was going. "The truth is," she swallowed hard, "there isn't one." Daniel frowned. "What happened?" Emily stared at the floor. "The man I loved disappeared the moment I told him I was pregnant. He blocked my number. He changed cities. He never even saw his son." Daniel clenched his jaw. "I'm sorry. I spent months pretending everything was fine because I couldn't bear to break my grandfather's heart." She wiped away a tear. "Every time he asked about my husband, I made up another excuse. He works overseas. He's traveling. He's busy. I kept lying because I wanted him to have hope." Daniel sighed. "And now?" "The hospital called this morning. They said Grandpa wanted one final family visit." Her voice nearly broke. "He asked if my husband and the baby could come." Daniel looked at Noah sleeping peacefully. "I can't let him die believing I was abandoned. I can't watch the man who sacrificed his whole life for me spend his last moments worrying that I'll be alone forever." The room fell silent again. Daniel rubbed his forehead. "This is a huge thing to ask. I know. You don't even know me. I know. You have no reason to trust me. I know." She smiled weakly. "But when I walked into this hospital today, I prayed for a miracle." Daniel looked confused. "A miracle?" I asked God to send someone kind enough to help a stranger. She laughed quietly through her tears. When I saw you sitting here alone, something inside me said to ask. Daniel wasn't sure whether to feel honored or overwhelmed. What if I'm the wrong person? Emily looked directly into his eyes. You are the only person who looked at everyone walking by with kindness instead of impatience. He didn't know how to respond. She slowly stood up. I'm sorry for bothering you. I shouldn't have asked. She turned to leave. Daniel watched her take only 2 steps before he spoke. Wait. Emily stopped but didn't turn around. If I even consider this. She faced him again. I need one thing. She nodded immediately. Anything. No more lies. I want the entire truth. Everything. No secrets. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, as though she had been carrying a weight for years. When she opened them again, fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. There is something I've never told anyone. Daniel could see the fear in her face. Whatever she was about to reveal was far bigger than pretending he was the baby's father for a single day, and deep down he realized that agreeing to help her might change both of their lives forever. Daniel sat quietly as Emily gathered the courage to reveal the truth she had hidden for so long. She took a deep breath, holding Noah close against her shoulder. When I found out I was pregnant, she began, I wasn't just abandoned by Noah's father. I lost almost everyone. She explained how friends slowly stopped calling, relatives criticized her decisions, and neighbors whispered whenever she walked past. The man who had promised to marry her vanished without leaving a trace, and the shame of raising a child alone became a burden she carried every day. The only person who never judged her was her grandfather. Believing he was protecting her happiness, he continued to ask about the husband he thought existed. Emily couldn't bring herself to destroy the last dream that gave the old man peace. Daniel listened without interrupting. Every sentence made him understand why she had taken such a desperate step. I don't expect you to fix my life, she said softly. I only want my grandfather's last memory to be a happy one. After several moments of silence, Daniel nodded. I'll help. Emily stared at him in disbelief. You mean it? He smiled gently. Just for today. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, Thank you. A nurse directed them toward the hospice wing, where Emily's grandfather was resting. Before entering the room, Emily nervously straightened Daniel's shirt collar. I'm sorry, she said with an embarrassed smile. I'm acting like we've known each other forever. Daniel chuckled. I guess we'll have to look convincing. She took one last deep breath before opening the door. The elderly man lay peacefully in bed, looking frail but alert. The moment he saw Emily holding Noah, his tired face lit up. Then his eyes moved toward Daniel. So, the old man smiled warmly, you finally made it. Daniel stepped forward, trying to hide his nervousness. I'm sorry it took me so long. The old man reached out his trembling hand. I'm happy you're here, son. Daniel shook his hand gently. It's an honor to meet you. The grandfather's eyes filled with tears as he looked at Noah. My beautiful great-grandson. Emily carefully placed the baby in his arms. The old man smiled with a happiness that seemed to erase years of pain. I've waited so long for this. Daniel glanced at Emily. She quietly wiped away tears, relieved that her grandfather looked truly happy. For the next hour, they talked about ordinary things. The grandfather asked how they met, and Emily cleverly answered most of the questions while Daniel added small details to make the story believable. They laughed about imaginary vacations, shared made-up memories, and even joked about Noah inheriting Daniel's stubborn personality. It felt strange, yet surprisingly natural. At one point, the grandfather looked directly at Daniel. Take care of my girls. Daniel's smile slowly faded. "I will." The words escaped before he even thought about them. Later that afternoon, the grandfather fell asleep. Emily and Daniel quietly stepped into the hallway. "I can't thank you enough," she whispered. "You've given him something I never could." Daniel shook his head. "You gave him that. I only stood beside you." As they sat together in the waiting area, Noah suddenly began crying. Emily searched through her diaper bag, but couldn't find his bottle. "I must have left it in the car." "I'll get it," Daniel said. When he returned a few minutes later, he found Emily trying unsuccessfully to calm the baby. Daniel gently picked Noah up. To Emily's surprise, the baby stopped crying almost immediately. Daniel smiled awkwardly. "I guess he likes me." Emily laughed for the first time that day, a genuine, heartfelt laugh. "He doesn't usually calm down with strangers." Daniel looked at the little boy sleeping peacefully against his shoulder. "Maybe he just needed someone to hold him." Emily watched the scene quietly. For a brief moment, they looked exactly like the family they were pretending to be. That evening another doctor approached them. "I'm afraid his condition has become more serious," the doctor said gently. "You should stay close tonight." Emily's hands began to tremble. Daniel instinctively reached over and held one of them. She looked at him, surprised by the simple gesture. "You don't have to stay anymore," she whispered. "Our agreement was only for one day." Daniel looked toward the room where her grandfather rested. "I know." He paused before speaking again. "But some promises shouldn't end because the clock says they should." Emily lowered her eyes, unable to hide the emotion on her face. For the first time in months, she no longer felt completely alone. Neither of them realized it yet, but the role they had agreed to play for a single day was slowly becoming something neither had expected. What began as an act of kindness was quietly turning into a connection that neither of them could explain. The next morning, the hospital corridors were quieter than ever. Daniel had barely slept, choosing to remain in the waiting room while Emily rested for a few hours beside her grandfather's bed. Just before sunrise, a nurse gently approached them with a solemn expression. Without saying a word, Emily understood. She hurried into the room, Daniel following a few steps behind. Her grandfather lay peacefully, his face calm, as though he had simply fallen asleep. Emily took his hand and whispered through her tears, "Thank you for giving me a home, for believing in me, and for loving Noah before you even met him." She cried silently while Daniel stood respectfully near the door, giving her the space she needed. Later that afternoon, the funeral was held. Friends, neighbors, and distant relatives gathered to pay their respects. Many of them warmly greeted Daniel, believing he was Emily's husband. He quietly accepted their condolences, knowing the truth would only complicate a painful day. As the ceremony ended, Emily looked at Daniel with gratitude. "You've done more than I ever asked," she said. "You should go back to your own life now." Daniel nodded, though something inside him felt unexpectedly heavy. "I guess this is goodbye." Emily forced a smile. "I'll never forget what you did for us." She placed Noah in his stroller and slowly walked away without looking back. Daniel watched until she disappeared around the corner. He told himself it was over, that it had only been a favor between strangers. But over the following days, he couldn't stop thinking about them. Every morning, he remembered Noah's tiny hand wrapping around his finger. Every evening, he remembered Emily's tired smile and the courage she had shown despite everything she had endured. He realized that the silence in his apartment felt louder than ever before. A week later, Daniel made a decision. He returned to the hospital, hoping someone might know where Emily had gone. After speaking with a kind nurse who recognized him, he learned that Emily had moved into her grandfather's small house on the outskirts of town. Daniel hesitated outside the modest home, holding a small bag of groceries and a stuffed teddy bear for Noah. Before he could knock, the front door opened. Emily froze in surprise. "Daniel? I know I probably shouldn't be here," he admitted, "but I couldn't stop wondering how you and Noah were doing." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Emily smiled. "I'm glad you came." She invited him inside. The house was simple, but filled with old family photographs. Some boxes were still unpacked after the funeral. Noah was lying on a blanket in the living room, happily playing with a colorful toy. The moment Noah saw Daniel, he reached out both hands and laughed. Daniel couldn't help smiling. "I think he remembers me." Emily laughed softly. "He doesn't react like that with many people." Over the next few weeks, Daniel visited often. Sometimes he fixed broken shelves around the house. Sometimes he brought groceries or cooked dinner when Emily was exhausted. Other times, he simply sat on the floor playing with Noah while Emily caught up on much-needed rest. Neither of them spoke about the future. They simply enjoyed each other's company. One evening, while Noah slept peacefully in his crib, Emily looked at Daniel. "Why are you doing all this?" He thought carefully before answering. "At first, I stayed because I made a promise." He smiled. "But now, I'm here because I want to be." Emily lowered her eyes. "I've been afraid to believe anyone could choose us." Daniel gently took her hand. "I can't change your past." He paused. "But I'd like to be part of your future." Tears filled Emily's eyes. "You deserve someone with a normal life." Daniel shook his head. "I don't want a perfect life. I want a real one." Months passed. Their friendship slowly turned into love, not through grand gestures, but through ordinary moments, bedtime stories, shared meals, quiet conversations, and countless little acts of kindness. One sunny afternoon, Daniel took Emily and Noah to the same park where they had spent their first outing together. Kneeling beneath a large oak tree, he smiled nervously. "The first time we met, you asked me to pretend to be Noah's father for one day." Emily laughed through happy tears. "I remember." Daniel held out a small ring. "I don't want to pretend anymore. I want to be his father every day for the rest of my life, if you'll let me." Emily covered her mouth, overwhelmed with emotion. "Yes," she whispered. "No more pretending." Noah clapped his tiny hands as though he understood the moment, making both of them laugh. A few months later, they were married in a small ceremony attended by close friends and neighbors. There were no elaborate decorations or expensive celebrations, only genuine smiles, heartfelt vows, and the memory of one man whose final wish had unknowingly brought two lonely hearts together. Sometimes the greatest families are not created by blood or by chance. They begin with one unexpected question, one impossible act of kindness, and one person willing to stay long after the reason for leaving has disappeared.